Have you ever witnessed a moment of casual cruelty and wished you could see justice served right then and there? We're about to take you inside the exclusive first-class cabin of Aura Airlines Flight 88 from New York to London. Here, a veteran flight attendant, confident in her authority, decides to make an example of a young black woman over the perceived cheapness of her handbag. But what she doesn't know is that the woman's husband is watching, and he's not just any passenger. He is the man who owns the entire airline. Stay with us for a stunning story of prejudice power and the kind of hard karma that changes lives forever. The Aura Airlines International First Class Lounge at John F. Kennedy International Airport was a sanctuary of hushed tones and muted luxury. The scent of expensive leather, freshly brewed single-origin coffee, and a faint, clean note of white tea hung in the air. Here, the cacophony of the main terminal was a distant memory, replaced by the soft clinking of porcelain on saucers and the quiet murmur of conversations about stock options and summering in the Hamptons. Dr. Serafina Williams sat in a plush armchair by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the ballet of ground crews and aircraft on the tarmac. At 32, she possessed a quiet confidence that was often mistaken for aloofness. She was dressed in a simple, elegant navy blue cashmere travel suit that prioritized comfort without sacrificing an ounce of style. Her hair was styled in intricate locks, adorned with a few delicate gold cuffs that caught the light. On the small table beside her rested her passport, a book on quantum entanglement, and her handbag. The bag was the antithesis of the loud luxury toted by many in the lounge. It wasn't a Birkin or a Chanel 255. It was a bespoke creation from a small, independent artisan in Florence named Matteo Ricci, crafted from a unique vegetable-tanned goat leather that had a soft matte finish. Its design was minimalist, its lines clean, its only hardware, a single unbranded brass clasp. To the untrained eye, it might have looked plain, perhaps even unremarkable. To a connoisseur, it was a masterpiece of understated craftsmanship. It was a gift from her husband, and she cherished it. Serafina was absorbed in her book when a sharp, imperious voice cut through the lounge's serene atmosphere. "Ma'am, your carry-on luggage will need to be sized. All items must conform to regulations." Serafina looked up. Standing before her was a flight attendant who appeared to be in her late 50s. Her blonde hair was sprayed into a helmet of immobility, and her makeup was a mask of professional yet severe perfection. Her name tag read Brenda. Her smile did not reach her eyes, which were currently fixed on Serafina's handbag, with a look of undisguised disdain. Brenda Jenkins had been with Aura Airlines for 28 years. She considered herself a gatekeeper, not just of the aircraft, but of the very class of first class. She had seen the airline evolve from a legacy carrier to a premium global brand, and she felt a fierce proprietary ownership over its standards. In her mind, these standards were not just about safety, but about maintaining a certain aesthetic, a certain clientele. And Dr. Serafina Williams, in Brenda's snap judgment, did not fit. The plain bag, the modern hairstyle, the youth, it all registered in Brenda's mind as new money at best, or out of place at worst. "Of course," Serafina replied, her voice calm and even. "It fits comfortably under the seat. It's well within the dimensions." Brenda's eyes narrowed slightly. "All rollerboards and large personal items must be checked at the desk. We're expecting a full cabin, and overhead space will be at a premium." She was deliberately mischaracterizing the bag. It was a handbag, not a rollerboard. A nearby passenger, a woman in her 60s with a diamond the size of a robin's egg on her finger, and a very conspicuous Louis Vuitton duffel at her feet, watched with mild interest. "This is my personal item," Serafina clarified patiently, gesturing to the bag. "My carry-on is already checked at the gate." Brenda leaned in, picking up the bag without asking. The violation of personal space was palpable. She turned it over in her hands, her lips pursed in a judgmental sneer. "Well, it looks a bit flimsy. We need to ensure that whatever you're carrying in this won't be a hazard if it falls apart mid-flight." The insult was as sharp as it was deliberate. Flimsy. Falls apart. She was not just insulting the bag, she was insulting its owner. Serafina felt a familiar, weary pang. It was the exhaustion of having to constantly prove her belonging in spaces where her presence was questioned. She had a PhD in astrophysics from MIT. She consulted with NASA. Yet here in this lounge, her worth was being weighed by a flight attendant based on the perceived quality of her handbag. "I can assure you," Serafina said, her voice dropping a fraction of a degree, "it is perfectly sound." Brenda placed the bag back on the table with a dismissive thud. "We'll see at the gate. Be prepared to check it." She turned on her heel and glided away, leaving a wake of tension behind her. The woman with the Louis Vuitton bag offered Serafina a look that was a mixture of pity and smug superiority, then returned to her newspaper. Serafina took a slow, deep breath. She looked at her phone. A text from her husband, Harrison, just landed at JFK. "Traffic looks insane. I might be cutting it close. Don't let them leave without me board as scheduled. Love you." She smiled faintly and texted back, "Wouldn't dream of it. See you on board. Love you more." She didn't mention the incident with Brenda. Harrison had enough to worry about, and besides, she was more than capable of handling a petty tyrant in a uniform. She had no idea that this small, unpleasant encounter was merely the prelude to a storm that was about to break over the Atlantic. The call for first-class boarding for Aura Flight 88 to London Heathrow began precisely 45 minutes before takeoff. Serafina gathered her belongings and joined the short, orderly queue at gate B24. Brenda was there standing beside a younger male flight attendant named Leo. Leo had a kind face and a genuine smile, and he greeted each passenger warmly. Brenda, however, seemed to be scanning each person, her eyes lingering on their luggage, her expression a mask of stern vigilance. When Serafina reached the front, Leo smiled. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Williams. We have you in Suite 1A. "Thank you, Leo," Serafina replied, handing him her boarding pass. But before she could step onto the jet bridge, Brenda stepped forward, physically blocking her path. "Just a moment," she said, her voice loud enough for the passengers behind them to hear. "The bag. As I mentioned in the lounge, I have concerns." Leo looked confused. "Brenda, it's just a handbag. It's fine." Brenda ignored him completely, her focus entirely on Serafina. "The airline has a strict policy on baggage integrity. Frankly, this looks like something you'd buy on a street corner. It doesn't look like it can safely secure its contents." The line behind Serafina had now come to a complete halt. People were craning their necks, their curiosity piqued. The woman with the Louis Vuitton bag was directly behind her, an audible sigh of impatience escaping her lips. The public nature of the humiliation was intentional. This was a power play designed to put Serafina in her place. Serafina's calm began to fray at the edges, replaced by a cold, controlled anger. "With all due respect," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "you are not a materials expert. You are a flight attendant. This bag is my personal property. It meets all size and weight regulations, and I will be taking it on board with me." Brenda let out a short, derisive laugh. "Oh, I've been doing this job for almost 30 years, honey. I know cheap when I see it. We can't have your personal effects spilling all over the aisle at 35,000 feet because your purse couldn't handle the pressure. The use of the word honey was a patronizing jab, a verbal pat on the head. Leo stepped forward, his expression mortified. Brenda, that's enough. Dr. Williams, please my apologies. Go right ahead. Brenda shot him a venomous look. Stay out of this, Leo. You're new. You don't understand the standards we have to uphold. She turned back to Serafina. Now you can either put this bag inside a more suitable container, we can provide a plastic dust bag for you, or you can check it. Those are your only options. To be offered a plastic bag, as if her bespoke leather handbag were a pair of muddy shoes, was the final straw. The entire situation had tipped from unprofessional into utterly absurd. I will be doing neither, Serafina stated, her voice now ringing with an authority that made several people in the line shift uncomfortably. I am a paying passenger in your highest class of service. This is harassment. I would like to speak to your gate supervisor. Now. I am the purser on this flight, Brenda announced proudly, as if this were a checkmate. The senior cabin authority. My decision is final. You're holding up the entire boarding process. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the sizer next to the counter. Prove it. Put it in the sizer. Let's see if it even fits. It was a ridiculous demand. The sizer was for rigid carry-on suitcases, not soft leather handbags. But Serafina, seeing no other way to end the standoff without causing an even bigger scene, walked over and placed her bag into the metal cage. It slid in with inches to spare on every side. She looked at Brenda, her eyebrows raised in a silent challenge. Brenda's face flushed a blotchy red. She had been so certain, so smugly sure of herself. Being proven wrong so publicly and so definitively only hardened her resolve. She was no longer just enforcing a perceived rule. She was defending her own wounded pride. The size is one thing, Brenda snapped, moving the goalposts. The quality is another. I'm making a captain's decision. It's a potential safety hazard. A captain's decision? Serafina's voice dripped with incredulity. My handbag is a safety hazard. On what grounds? On the grounds of my 28 years of experience. Brenda's voice rose, losing its professional veneer and cracking with raw frustration. Now check the bag or you will be denied boarding on this flight. A collective gasp went through the line. Denied boarding over a purse, Leo looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. The woman with the Vuitton bag now looked less smug and more horrified. This was no longer amusing. It was a deeply uncomfortable abuse of power. Serafina stood her ground, her heart pounding with a mixture of fury and disbelief. She was about to demand they call security the airline's corporate office, anyone who would listen, when a calm, deep voice cut through the tension from behind the line. Is there a problem here? The voice was quiet, yet it carried an unmistakable weight of authority that silenced the murmurs in the queue. Every head turned, including Brenda's. Walking briskly toward the gate, weaving through the stalled passengers with an apologetic nod here and a quick smile, there was a man in his late 30s. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, but he had loosened his tie, and his collar was unbuttoned, suggesting a long day of travel. He had a warm, intelligent face, but right now his eyes, a startling shade of blue, were narrowed with concern as he looked at his wife, Serafina, and then at the flustered flight attendant blocking her path. It was Harrison Cole. To the passengers, he was just another late-arriving businessman, perhaps concerned about the delay he was witnessing. To Leo, the junior flight attendant, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He'd seen that face before in training videos and company-wide emails on the cover of the in-flight magazine. But it seemed impossible. What would a man like that be doing here in a boarding queue, Brenda, however, saw only another passenger trying to interfere. "Sir, we are in the middle of a boarding process," she said curtly, not even bothering to look at him properly. "Please wait your turn. This passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions." Harrison Cole ignored Brenda completely. His entire focus was on his wife. He walked straight up to her, his suitcase rolling silently behind him. "Siri, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. He gently touched her arm, a small gesture of support that spoke volumes. "I'm fine, Harrison," Serafina replied, though the relief in her voice was evident. "We're just having a difference of opinion regarding my bag's structural integrity." Harrison looked from Serafina's face to the bag sitting forlornly in the sizer, then finally to Brenda. He gave her his full attention for the first time, and his expression was unreadable. "You're the purser on this flight." Brenda bristled at his tone. Who did this man think he was? "I am," she said, lifting her chin. "And this is a crew matter." "I see," Harrison said slowly. He glanced at her name tag. "Brenda." He looked over at the younger flight attendant. "And you are Leo Valdez, sir." Leo stammered, his eyes wide. The gears were turning in his head, the face the quiet command, the way Dr. Williams had said his name. Harrison. It couldn't be. Harrison nodded at Leo, then turned his gaze back to Brenda. Her posture was rigid, her arms crossed. She was a fortress of self-righteousness. "Brenda," he said, his voice perfectly level, "please explain to me in detail the exact safety regulation my wife's handbag is violating." The word hung in the air, electric and heavy. "My wife's." Brenda's condescending expression faltered for the first time. She looked from Harrison to Serafina and back again. The well-dressed man, the quiet black woman, a husband and wife. The picture didn't compute with the prejudiced narrative she had constructed in her head. But she had gone too far to back down now. Her professional pride, however misguided, was on the line. "Sir, your wife's bag is substandard." Brenda managed the word sounding weaker now. "It appears to be of poor construction. As purser, I am responsible for the safety of everyone on board, and I have deemed that item to be a risk. It could tear, spilling its contents, creating a hazard in the event of an emergency." "A hazard," Harrison repeated, his voice flat. He walked over to the sizer and gently lifted Serafina's bag. He held it in his hands, running a thumb over the fine stitching on the handle. He knew the bag well. He had commissioned it himself from Matteo Ricci as a first anniversary gift, a process that had taken 6 months. He knew the leather was sourced from a specific herd of goats in Tuscany. He knew the brass clasp was hand-forged. He knew it was lined with silk. The idea that this exquisite piece of craftsmanship was substandard was laughable. He turned to Brenda, his blue eyes now as cold as chips of ice. "You've made an assessment of its quality based on a visual inspection." "My experience tells me all I need to know," Brenda insisted, though a tremor of uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Your experience?" Harrison said, his voice dangerously soft. "Let's talk about that." He pulled out his phone. The passengers in the line were now utterly captivated. This was better than any in-flight movie. The quiet authority of this man, his calm defense of his wife, and the flight attendant's increasingly fragile composure made for riveting drama. Harrison typed a quick message. A moment later, his phone buzzed. He looked at it, then back at Brenda. "Brenda Jenkins," he read aloud. "Employee number 7432. Employed with Aura Airlines for 28 years. Based out of JFK. Purser qualified for 12 years. You've had 17 official customer complaints lodged against you in the last 5 years, 9 of which specifically mention discriminatory or prejudiced behavior. 4 of those were formally investigated, but closed due to lack of evidence. Brenda's face went white. All the color drained from it, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of horror. How could he know that that information was deep in her employee file, accessible only to the highest levels of corporate HR? Who was this man? Leo, standing frozen a few feet away, finally connected the last dot. Harrison. Mr. Cole. The man on the cover of the magazine. The CEO. Harrison Cole, the founder and chief executive officer of Aura Airlines. He felt a wave of nausea. Brenda had just spent the last 10 minutes harassing and insulting the wife of the man who owned the entire company. The silence at Gate B24 was absolute, broken only by the distant tinny announcement for a flight to Dallas. Every passenger in the queue, every gate agent, every crew member was frozen, watching the slow-motion implosion of Brenda Jenkins's career. Her mind was a maelstrom of denial and panic. It wasn't possible. The CEO here, dressed like this. Not in a chauffeured car on the tarmac, not boarding last with a security detail, but walking through the terminal like a normal person. It defied the natural order of things as she understood it. Who are you? She whispered the question, a fragile thread in the thick silence. Harrison slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet, controlled fury was more terrifying than any shout. "My name is Harrison Cole," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I'm the CEO of this airline, and the woman you have been harassing, whose bag you've insulted, and who you threatened to deny boarding to, is Dr. Serafina Williams Cole. My wife." The name Harrison Cole landed like a physical blow. Brenda visibly recoiled, staggering back a step as if she'd been struck. Her carefully constructed world of seniority and authority shattered into a million pieces. The rules she had wielded like a weapon, the standards she had claimed to uphold, all of it was meaningless now. She had not been protecting the airline's brand. She had been savaging it in front of its creator. Her gaze darted wildly around. She looked at Leo, whose face was a mixture of shock, and she imagined a little bit of pity. She looked at the passengers, their expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to a sort of grim satisfaction. The woman with the Louis Vuitton bag now refused to meet her eyes, suddenly fascinated by the scuffs on her own expensive shoes. There was no support here. No one was on her side. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. "Mr. Cole, I didn't know," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I was just following procedure. I was concerned about safety." The excuses sounded hollow and pathetic, even to her own ears. "Procedure?" Harrison's voice was sharp. "Show me the procedure, Brenda. Show me the page in our operations manual that gives you or any employee the right to publicly humiliate a passenger based on your personal assessment of their handbag. Show me the rule that allows you to invent safety concerns to justify your own prejudices." He took a step closer. "You weren't upholding a standard. You were enforcing a bias. You looked at my wife and you made a judgment. You decided she didn't belong here. You used the uniform and the authority this company gave you to bully a woman who has shown you nothing but grace and patience. You did it in the lounge, and you did it again here in front of a dozen other customers." Serafina placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "Harrison," she said softly. He glanced at her, and for a moment the ice in his eyes thawed. He saw the fatigue in her expression, the deep-seated weariness of a lifetime spent navigating these small, poisonous aggressions. His anger solidified into a cold resolve. This was not just about Brenda. This was about the culture she represented. He turned back to the now trembling purser. "You are a disgrace to this uniform, Brenda. You are the antithesis of everything Aura Airline stands for." He looked at Leo. "Leo, You are now the acting purser for Flight 88. Get the rest of the passengers boarded, please. Starting with Dr. Williams Cole. Yes, sir. Right away, Mr. Cole, Leo said, snapping into action. He turned to Serafina with a look of profound apology. Dr. Williams Cole, please, right this way. My sincerest apologies for this. Serafina gave Leo a small, appreciative nod. She picked up her bag from where Harrison had placed it on a counter, and with her head held high, walked down the jet bridge. Harrison waited until she was out of sight before turning his attention back to Brenda. Your flying duties for today are over, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. You will not set foot on that aircraft. You will hand your company ID to the gate supervisor. You will then go home. You will be contacted by Catherine Bishop from Human Resources first thing Monday morning. Do you understand? Catherine Bishop. The name was a death knell. She was the senior vice president of HR, a woman known for her surgical precision in corporate amputations. A call from Catherine Bishop didn't mean a suspension. It meant an execution. Brenda could only nod, tears welling in her eyes, smearing her carefully applied mascara. The professional mask had crumbled, revealing the terrified, broken person beneath. In the space of 5 minutes, her 28-year career, her identity, her future, it had all evaporated before her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words choked with a sob. Harrison looked at her, his expression devoid of any sympathy. You're not sorry for what you did, Brenda, he said, his voice cutting to the bone. You're just sorry you got caught. With that, he turned and walked down the jet bridge without a backward glance, leaving Brenda Jenkins standing alone in the terminal, a relic of a bygone era, surrounded by the wreckage of her own making. Once on board, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin was thick with unspoken tension. The passengers who had witnessed the scene at the gate studiously avoided making eye contact with each other, a collective shame hanging in the air. They had all been bystanders to a cruel and unwarranted attack, and now they were sharing a cabin with the victim and her impossibly powerful husband. Harrison found Serafina in Suite 1A, gazing out the window. He knelt beside her seat, taking her hand. Are you really okay? She turned to him, a faint, sad smile on her lips. I'm tired, Harrison. Just tired. It's not the first time something like this has happened. It's just usually not so theatrical. It's the last time it will happen on this airline. He vowed, his jaw tight with anger. I promise you that. The new acting purser. Leo approached their suite with a notable nervousness. Mr. Cole, Dr. Williams Cole. He began, his voice a little shaky. On behalf of the entire crew, I am so deeply sorry for what happened. It was unprofessional, unacceptable, and it never should have occurred. Thank you, Leo, Serafina said, her voice warm and genuine. It wasn't your fault. You tried to de-escalate the situation. I should have done more, Leo insisted, his face etched with guilt. I should have called a supervisor immediately. You did the best you could in a difficult situation, Harrison said, his tone professional but reassuring. What's important now is the flight. Let's ensure our passengers have a safe and comfortable journey to London. Yes, sir, Leo said, visibly relieved. He then offered them pre-departure champagne, the airline's finest vintage Dom Perignon, and attended to them with a level of care that bordered on reverence for the remainder of the flight. As the plane climbed to its cruising altitude, the incident began to ripple through the aircraft. Whispers spread from first class to business, and even to the crew in the galley. The story became a piece of instant airline lore, the purser, who tried to bully the CEO's wife and was fired on the spot. For Serafina, the flight was a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, she was deeply hurt. Brenda's words had been designed to diminish her, to make her feel small and unworthy, and they had struck a chord of accumulated pain from a lifetime of similar microaggressions. The assumption that she, a black woman, couldn't possibly belong in a first-class cabin without being a guest, a fraud, or the owner of cheap things, was an exhausting narrative she had fought against her entire life. On the other hand, she felt a profound sense of validation from Harrison's response. He hadn't just defended her. He had understood the insidious nature of the attack. He hadn't dismissed it as a simple case of a rude employee. He had identified it for what it was. Prejudice, pure and simple. His swift, decisive action wasn't just about protecting his wife. It was about protecting the integrity of the values he had worked so hard to instill in his company. She watched him across the suite as he worked on his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was already drafting an email to Catherine Bishop and the entire executive board. The subject line was stark: Urgent Zero-Tolerance Policy Review. Meanwhile, a different kind of fallout was occurring in the business-class cabin. The woman with the Louis Vuitton bag, a Mrs. Davenport who had watched the entire scene unfold, felt a growing sense of shame. She had initially sympathized, however slightly, with Brenda. She too had made a snap judgment about Serafina. She had seen a young black woman with an unbranded bag and had silently drawn her own conclusions. Harrison Cole's revelation had shattered her assumptions, not just about Serafina, but about herself. She flagged down a flight attendant. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I need to speak with the acting purser, if I may. It's about what happened at the gate. I was a witness, and I feel I should give a statement." The flight attendant nodded and fetched Leo. Mrs. Davenport recounted the entire incident to him, from the initial confrontation in the lounge to Brenda's final, venomous threat. She was unflinching in her account, not sparing her own initial biased reaction. She singled Dr. Williams Cole out from the very beginning. Mrs. Davenport concluded, her voice filled with regret. It was entirely unprovoked and deeply discriminatory. "Please make sure that is in your report." Leo took meticulous notes, thanking her for her candor. It was another nail in Brenda Jenkins's professional coffin, this time hammered in by a fellow passenger who recognized their own complicity in the culture of silent judgment. The karma was not just swift, it was becoming thorough. Monday morning dawned gray and unforgiving over New York City, a perfect mirror for the dread that had settled deep in Brenda Jenkins's bones. The weekend had been a blur of sleepless nights, frantic replays of the gateside confrontation, and a churning, acidic mixture of panic and denial. The summons had come via a stark, impersonal email on Saturday, mandatory meeting regarding on-duty conduct, with the time and the address of the corporate headquarters in Manhattan. There was no room for interpretation. Her journey into the city felt like a condemned woman's final walk. Every step from the Long Island Railroad platform to the bustling streets of Midtown was heavy with foreboding. The Airline's tower loomed over Park Avenue, a gleaming monument of glass and steel that she had always looked upon with proprietary pride. For 28 years it had been her fortress, the symbol of her identity. Today it felt like a courthouse. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate power, all soaring ceilings, Italian marble, and a massive backlit sculpture of the Airline's A logo that looked like a bird in flight. She who had once strode through this space with the unthinking confidence of a long-serving employee now felt like an intruder. Her visitor's pass, a flimsy sticker, felt like a brand of shame. The elevator ride to the 54th floor was silent and suffocating. The executive floor was a world away from the hustle of the crew lounges at JFK. Here the carpets were thick enough to swallow sound. The air was scented with something subtle and expensive, and the art on the walls was real. a polite but unsmiling executive assistant led her down a long hallway to a conference room at the corner of the building. "Ms. Bishop will be with you shortly," she said, before closing the door with a soft, final click. The room was designed to intimidate. A single massive table of polished dark mahogany dominated the space, surrounded by a dozen ergonomic leather chairs. Two of the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. But the grandeur was lost on Brenda. She felt exposed, trapped in a transparent box high above the city. She sat down, her hands trembling in her lap, and waited. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Catherine Bishop, the senior, Vice President of Human Resources, entered, followed by a stern-looking man Brenda recognized from company town halls as Michael Spears, the head of the legal department. Catherine was the picture of corporate grace, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, her expression calm and unreadable. Michael's face was a stony mask of legal prudence. They didn't smile. They took their seats directly across from her, the vast expanse of the table feeling like a chasm between them. "Brenda, thank you for coming in." Catherine began, her tone measured and professional. It was the voice of a person who had had this conversation many times before. "We are here to conduct a full review of the incident involving Dr. Serafina Williams-Cole that occurred on Friday at JFK Gate B24. We have your initial written statement, which you submitted Saturday. We also have detailed statements from First Officer Leo Valdez, the acting purser, on Flight 88, from 3 separate gate agents who were on duty, and from 4 separate first-class passengers who witnessed the events. One of those passengers, a Mrs. Eleanor Davenport, also provided a detailed account of your initial encounter with Dr. Williams-Cole in the first-class lounge." Brenda's blood ran cold. 4 passengers. She had clung to a desperate hope that this would be a messy internal affair, her word against an influential passenger's. But with this many corroborating witnesses, her narrative of following procedure was already dead on arrival. Catherine slid a tablet to the center of the table and tapped the screen. "Before we discuss the written statements, I'd like to play the audio from the gate's primary security camera. The microphone is sensitive, so the quality is quite clear." The sound that filled the silent room was horrifyingly familiar. It was her own voice, sharp and laced with a condescending authority that made her cringe in her seat. She was forced to listen to the entire exchange, every venomous word echoing off the glass walls. "Frankly, this looks like something you'd buy on a street corner." The disdain in her voice was palpable, a naked judgment on class and taste. "I've been doing this job for almost 30 years, honey. I know cheap when I see it." The word honey dripped with a patronizing poison she hadn't even recognized herself using at the time. "Check the bag or you will be denied boarding on this flight." The shriek of her final desperate assertion of power sounded unhinged, a frantic abuse of authority. When the audio ended, the silence that followed was deafening. Brenda stared at the polished surface of the table, unable to meet Catherine's gaze. The woman on that recording was ugly, cruel, and unprofessional, and it was her. Catherine folded her hands. "Brenda, the Airline's Code of Conduct, a document you have signed and reaffirmed annually for 28 years, is the bedrock of our corporate culture. Section 4, subsection B, explicitly forbids discrimination and harassment of any kind. It states, and I quote, 'Employees will treat all customers and colleagues with dignity and respect, regardless of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or perceived social standing.'" She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Your actions were in direct and flagrant violation of this code. But let me be absolutely clear about one thing. Had Dr. Williams Cole been any other passenger on that flight, this review would be happening in the exact same way. The fact that she is married to our CEO only served to bring this issue to the highest level of attention with immediate urgency. The core problem remains your treatment of a customer. Michael Spears, the lawyer, leaned forward. From a legal standpoint, Brenda, your actions were catastrophic. You didn't just harass a passenger, you created a verifiable, hostile service environment. By inventing a safety hazard, substandard quality, and the risk of spilling contents to justify your actions after the bag was proven to meet all size requirements, you acted in bad faith. This exposes Aura Airlines to significant liability, not just to a potential discrimination lawsuit from Dr. Williams Cole, but to FAA penalties for improper denial of service. You put the company in legal jeopardy. A desperate defensive fire flickered in Brenda's chest. It wasn't like that, she pleaded, her voice raspy. I was having a terrible day. My mother is ill. The flight was overbooked. We were understaffed. I was stressed. I made a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake. But 28 years of loyal service, of perfect reviews. Doesn't that count for anything? My entire life has been this airline. It was Catherine's turn to lean forward, her expression shifting from neutral to one of grave seriousness. This was the moment the axe would fall. We did look at your 28-year record, Brenda. Meticulously. And while it does contain numerous commendations for operational efficiency, it also contains the pattern of customer complaints that Mr. Cole referenced. She opened a folder in front of her. These are not just numbers in a file. They are stories. In 2021, a complaint from a passenger on a flight to Tokyo stating you were, quote, exceptionally rude and dismissive to his elderly parents who did not speak English well. In 2022, a complaint from a family flying to Orlando who felt you were, quote, targeting them and their children for noise while ignoring a group of loud businessmen nearby. In 2024, a formal complaint from a passenger who alleged you made him check a carry-on that was perfectly compliant while allowing another passenger with a visibly larger designer brand bag to board without issue. His letter states, it felt like I was being judged for how I was dressed, not for the size of my bag. Catherine looked up from the folder, her eyes locking onto Brenda's. Separately, these incidents were investigated and closed, often with a note about your otherwise stellar record. But viewed together in the harsh light of Friday's event, they paint a clear and disturbing picture. This was not a one-time mistake born of stress. It was the culmination of a long-standing pattern of biased behavior and abuse of authority. You were a problem we failed to address, and on Friday that problem detonated on our premier international route. The hard karma wasn't just the firing. It was the systematic, evidence-based dismantling of her own self-image. She had always seen herself as a guardian of standards, a consummate professional. But the record showed a petty tyrant, a bully who used the rulebook as her personal weapon against people she deemed less than. The core value of Aura Airlines, the one Mr. Cole built this company on, is invitation, Catherine said, her voice now softer, laced with a finality that was more devastating than anger. We invite the world to fly with us, to feel welcomed, respected, and cared for, from the moment they enter our lounge to the moment they collect their bags. Your actions were the antithesis of an invitation. They were a rejection, a wall. You made a guest in our house feel unwelcome and unsafe. And for that reason, we can no longer trust you to be a representative of this brand. She slid a thick-bound folder across the vast mahogany table. It stopped just in front of Brenda. This is your severance package. In light of your long tenure, it is generous. It includes extended health coverage and outplacement services. However, your employment with Aura Airlines is terminated effective immediately. Terminated. The word, once a distant corporate abstraction, was now a guillotine blade that had severed her from her life. She stared at the folder, then back at Catherine, her vision blurring with tears. "Please," she whispered, the sound a raw, pathetic scrape. "Don't do this. I'll take training. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. It's all I have." Catherine's expression held a sliver of human pity, but her decision was immutable as stone. "The trust is broken, Brenda, irreparably. Our customers must have absolute faith in our crew, and you have shown that your personal judgment cannot be trusted. The decision is final. A car is waiting downstairs to take you home." Brenda Jenkins, former purser, stood up on legs that felt like they belonged to a stranger. The hard, confident woman who had lorded over Gate B24 was gone, hollowed out, and replaced by a broken, unemployed 58-year-old. As she took the folder and turned for the door, she didn't see the skyline or the marble lobby. She saw only the wreckage of a life built on a foundation of quiet cruelties. She finally understood. The bag had never been the issue. The real problem was the ugliness she had carried inside herself for years, and it had finally, irrevocably, cost her everything. A week later, the city lights of Manhattan sparkled like a fallen constellation outside the panoramic windows of Harrison Cole's office. The frantic energy of the city below was a stark contrast to the quiet, contemplative atmosphere inside. Harrison swirled a measure of amber scotch in a heavy crystal glass, the ice clinking softly. He and Serafina had been sitting in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the evening settle over the metropolis. The storm of the previous Friday had passed, but the air was still charged with its lingering ozone. Catherine's final report was clinical, Harrison said, breaking the silence. He stared into his glass, as if the answers were swirling in the liquid. Brenda didn't try to fight it after the meeting. She just signed the papers. Her office keys and badge were couriered over the next day. 28 years of her life packed into a single cardboard box. Serafina drew her legs up onto the plush sofa, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about her all week," she confessed, her voice soft, "and I don't feel any sense of victory. I just feel a profound sense of waste. All that time, all that experience poisoned by what a bitterness, a prejudice she was so blind to. She couldn't even see it in herself." This was the question that had haunted her. The expanded report Catherine had shared with Harrison, which he in turn had shared with her, painted a grim picture. Brenda wasn't just a rude employee. She was a case study in untreated bias. "That's the part that's so chilling," Harrison agreed, turning to face her. Catherine said that even as she was reading the past complaints aloud, the incident with the non-English speaking couple, the family she targeted, the man she judged for his clothing, Brenda's reaction wasn't comprehension, it was just confusion. It was as if she genuinely couldn't connect the dots. She saw each event as an isolated incident where she was simply enforcing the rules. She never saw that she was the variable, that her prejudice was the filter through which she applied those rules. He put his glass down with a decisive click. "I barely slept last weekend. I didn't want to. I had Catherine pull the raw data on every customer complaint filed in the last 3 years. I sat in my study and I read them. Not the summaries Siri, the actual letters and emails. Hundreds of them." He ran a hand through his hair, a deep frustration etched on his face. And the pattern was there all along, hiding in plain sight. It was in the language people used. Words like dismissed, unseen, judged, made to feel small. It wasn't about late flights or lost bags. It was about a lack of dignity. Brenda was a symptom of a disease I allowed to fester in the dark because I was too busy measuring the wrong things. He stood up and walked to his desk, picking up a bound document. How can I sit in board meetings and talk about market share and fleet acquisition when the fundamental human contract with our customers is being so quietly, pervasively broken? This ends. Now. He handed the document to Serafina. The cover was simple, elegant, and bore a title that made her sharp intake of breath audible in the quiet room: the Serafina Initiative, redefining welcome. Harrison, no, she said immediately, shaking her head as she looked at her own name in the print. You can't. I don't want my name to be the label for this mess. I don't want to be remembered as the woman whose bad experience at the gate prompted a policy change. You've misunderstood, he said, his voice earnest, as he sat on the edge of the coffee table in front of her. This isn't named after the incident. This is named after you, after your response, after the grace and strength you showed. The name Serafina means fiery one, ardent. That's what this initiative has to be. A fiery, ardent, and relentless commitment to human dignity. He leaned in, his passion for the project evident. The story of what happened will be the foundation of the new training program, anonymized, of course. But it will serve as a stark reminder of our capacity to fail. We're bringing in a team of sociologists from Columbia to help us build the curriculum from the ground up. We'll use immersive VR simulations to put our crews in difficult social scenarios, teaching them to recognize and de-escalate situations born of their own unconscious biases. He continued, the ideas pouring out of him. And this won't just be a training module people click through once a year. We're fundamentally changing how we evaluate performance. We are creating a new key performance indicator, the welcome score, based entirely on unfiltered customer feedback concerning respect, dignity, and inclusivity. And a significant portion of every single employee's bonus, from the baggage handler to the chief pilot to me, will be directly tied to that score. We're going to make respect profitable. We're going to make dignity a metric you can track on a spreadsheet. Serafina looked from the detailed proposal in her hands to the passionate conviction in her husband's eyes. He had taken a moment of profound personal pain and was forging it into a shield to protect thousands of other people. He wasn't just fixing a problem, he was trying to change a culture. Her name wouldn't be attached to a negative event. It would be the banner for a positive, powerful, and necessary transformation. The hard karma that had struck Brenda Jenkins was not merely the loss of her job. It was this. Her legacy, the unintended consequence of her actions, was to become the anonymous catalyst for a program that would dismantle the very culture of prejudice she had embodied. Her name would fade into obscurity within the airline, but the lesson learned from her failure would become a core tenet for a new generation of employees, ensuring that no one else would ever be made to feel the way Serafina had. A slow smile touched Serafina's lips. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were born not of pain or fatigue, but of a quiet, burning hope. Okay, she whispered, her hand covering his. Let's get to work. And so a single act of prejudice over a simple handbag didn't just end a career. It sparked a revolution in corporate culture. The story of Serafina and Harrison isn't just about a satisfying moment of karma. It's a powerful reminder that our actions, no matter how small, have ripples. It shows that true leadership isn't just about profits and bottom lines. It's about protecting the dignity of every single person you serve. Brenda Jenkins lost her job, not because she challenged the CEO's wife, but because she failed a fundamental test of human decency. If this story resonated with you, and you believe that respect and kindness should be the standard in every interaction, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of karma justice and the human condition. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.